The PSP was originally released in America in the year 2005 on March 24th, and God, time does fly. It's almost 20 years ago that the PSP was originally released, and that's crazy to think about. I have a very long history with my PSP, though I did not get mine until well after Sony discontinued them, because I was a very, very strange child who loved collecting video games. But overall, the PSP was a very interesting system. When it was originally released, it was a revolutionary device. It could do so many things that the Game Boy and later the DS wouldn't be able to do. For example, like play movies, surf the internet, download games from an online web store. Like, there were so many revolutionary things the PSP could do. It was just a technical marvel and way ahead of its time. And Sony tends to have that problem of being too revolutionary or too, into the concept of their device to really do it well, a la PS Vita. But the PSP, for what it was worth, did stick the landing, selling 80 million units. Almost 81 million, which is staggering. And it's just so crazy to think about that. The PSP sold more than the GameCube, sold more than the Wii U, sold more than the N64. Like, truly giant behemoths in the gaming industry just get toppled by the fucking PSP. Like, isn't it crazy to think about that sometimes? All the things the PSP can do, and it's still eventually lost to the DS in the end, which to this day just absolutely baffles me. Like, seriously, the PSP could do so much and the DS won. I get the DS had so many exclusives, that Pokemon and all that, but come on, the PSP was so much cooler. Like, I was a DS kid growing up, and I only had cousins who would come over and they would be having a PSP in their hands, because in terms on my mom's side of the family, me and my brother were the youngest in terms of how old we were. Like, everybody else around us on my mom's side were like in their teens in the 2005. So they were just in like, oh, the DS is for kids, and had a PSP. So I was always so envious, so just wanting something that cool. But as time passed, I would eventually get my own PSP, and it wouldn't be 10 years or so after the original release of the PSP, when it was long already discontinued by that point. But I loved it to bits, and I would enjoy that thing for years to come. But then I eventually got my Vita, and then I put my PSP down for the last time, until a couple weeks ago when I started to rearrange my room and I found my PSP again. And so it's been sitting on my desk for a while, and then I recently got a comment under one of my videos saying I should make a PSP video talking about, how it is to use again today. I was like, you know what? That's a great idea. Considering how well my PS Vita video did, let's see if I can accomplish the same thing again, the PSP. And my initial thoughts were this is going to be probably a pretty negative video, considering the PSP, as old as it is, isn't as capable at emulating things as the Vita even, especially for the price. And I maintain that to an extent, especially considering all the other outside factors. But nowadays you can find a PSP 1000 model for the absolute, like, the price floor for one that is functional and has its charger around 90 to 80 bucks. And then, like, you can find anything anywhere between like 80 to 150 depending on the quality, the version of the PSP, whether or not it comes with games, chargers, etc. You can find beat up ones and do a shell swap on them and stuff. But aside from that, the PSP has had a long life and has been supported by the community for a very long time after. And I was just a little underwhelmed. I don't think the PSP holds up quite as well as I hoped it would have. I was kind of hoping for more improvement in the hacking and homebrew scene. Like, it was a pain in the ass when I hacked my PSP, like 4 or 5 years ago. But it still is, which is surprising. Going in YouTube and seeing if there's any new, video tutorials that show it differently than I did back then, and not really, going onto like the forums and stuff, and they're still recommending the same guides I used those many years ago. So, just looking strictly what the PSP can do now, there are some very impressive ports. You can play Super Mario 64 Decompilation, or whatever it's called. It's very cool. It's one of the few N64 games that do run really well, but it's not emulated. It's like a port. So that's not necessarily a notch on the it's just not exactly impressive. It's still really cool, but I don't think it's necessarily impressive. Something I do think that is incredibly cool is seeing Quake running on the PSP. That was shocking to see. That was really, really cool. But overall, for like N64 emulation, it was very, very disappointing. I was really hoping that got better over time. But seeing how well N64 games run on the PS Vita, my hopes weren't exactly high. And it is possible to play some N64 games, and they do run better if you completely turn off all your audio, so it does help the steadiness in that aspect, but I don't think it's a good device for, playing N64 emulation. And of course, all the other things run that really well. It does PSP amazing because it's a PSP. It does PS1 really well, obviously, because that native support in the store, so you can just download a bunch of PS1 games, and they were just amazing to play on it. But the Vita could do the same thing and stuff like that. So it's like, why do you need the PSP? Game Boy Advance emulation still works just great. Super Nintendo, NES, Genesis, all that, fantastic. But I don't see how the PSP offers anything more than what devices like the Mii Mini just recently popped up on Amazon again. That device is around $67. On average, that's $30-ish, $20-ish cheaper than any PSP I could find on eBay recently. And that Mii Mini can emulate most of the same exact consoles. There's stuff like from Powkiddy, Ambernick that are in a very similar price range that can emulate more devices, including the PSP itself, better than the PSP. So I don't see the PSP anymore as a very solid choice when it comes to portable emulation. It was amazing for its time, and it was an amazing choice for like 10, 15 years of portable emulation. But since 2019 and 2020 and stuff, we've just been getting this complete avalanche of options and other devices and other companies coming into the sphere, releasing these other devices at a variety of price points. I don't think the PSP really holds up in that regard anymore. And considering the Vita exists, being one of the best ways to play PSP games at all, given that, the second analog stick, the bigger screen, the nicer screen, there's so much that, so many other devices that sort of co-opted aspects of the PSP, leaving very little for, if you don't already own one, very little reasons to go buy one. Out of all the portable handheld devices, the one I haven't seen getting any more expensive was the PSP. The Vita has become astronomically expensive. The 3DS has been climbing in price steadily year over year. Even DS Lites are climbing in price. Game Boys, all those devices are increasing in value over time. The PSP has sort of been around that price range it's currently in since I purchased my original PSP back in 2015, 2016. Back then, I bought it with a charger with 2 free games, $90 for my birthday, and so that's not really different anymore. The price is exactly the same, and I got a good deal at a mom and pop shop. So I don't see how, eBay is really, I just not necessarily, it might not be representative of what the current prices are, but given the information I have access to, the price isn't changing. People care less overall about the PSP because of all these other devices doing the same things the PSP can, but better and cheaper depending on what you're looking for. I love the PSP, but I just can't recommend it in 2023. If you already own one, it's awesome. Hack it, enjoy it. It is a very unique experience, and it's really nice playing on some sort of official gaming hardware. But if you're a new person to emulation and retro gaming, I just don't see how the PSP could offer a tremendous amount of value. I had a hard time recommending the Vita, given how expensive it is compared to, other devices to do more and better emulation. But if you are just a real big Sony head, buy a PS Vita instead of a PSP. You can enjoy the entirety of the Vita library, the PSP, the PS1, hack it, and get so much more and get better emulation performance on the ones that do work. It makes the most amount of sense to do it that way. So, closing thoughts here is just, the PSP is amazing and it will always have a close, spot to my heart. But it has definitely seen better times. It has aged not so gracefully compared to devices of the same vintage, and simply just cannot keep up performance-wise anymore with competing devices. So what are your thoughts? I would love to hear what you think down below. Are you still going to go buy a PSP for emulation? Does this video inspire you to go dig up your PSP and hack it to enjoy some good old-fashioned emulation on it? I'd love to hear your comments down below. I know this was a more negative video, but thanks for all the support on the recent videos. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, all that other social media garbage down below, and have a wonderful day.